So in my mind, I'm the picture of health. I'm a 30-year-old in a 68-year-old body. I'm coming back from the gym. I stop the car with my wife and son. I go to pick up this carrier, and as I'm walking back to the carrier, this pain and pressure just erupts in my chest. I kind of stumbled across the road to get to the car. I make it back to the car, and I collapse into the front seat, and I say to my wife, and my son, I said, listen, I don't want to get you guys freaked out, but something's not right here.
Welcome to the Eighth Gear Podcast. Great to have you back with us, Sabron Walker.
Joe Faraci.
And we have a great show today. We have Dr. Joel Parker. In the show today, you're also going to get a special announcement of a new project that Joel is announcing, so make sure and pay attention. This is going to be a big one. This guy was 17 years as a veterinary doctor, kicked butt up there in the Vancouver, Canada area. He created a manufacturing company. He is a stellar business consultant to the veterinary industry. But this guy has something else to share today. This is about how to live your best life and what happened to him and his story. And let's jump into it.
Thanks, Sabron.
Yep.
Joe, good to meet you. Listen, I was cruising along about a year ago, March 12th, had gone to the gym working out. I'm flying back and forth between two offices between Vancouver and just outside Tampa. I've got a consulting company going on. I've got a partner. I'm eating organic foods and, sure, a little bit too much sugar and all that stuff. And I'm going to the gym working with a personal trainer with my son a couple times a week. I'm in good shape. So in my mind, I'm the picture of health. I'm a 30-year-old in a 68-year-old body.
A lot of sushi in Vancouver.
A lot of sushi in Vancouver. Yeah, the best Asian food you're going to get outside of Asia. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I will say that, this is all about moving into the eighth gear, living your best life. This guy watches, wine, Porsches. Like this guy, living your best life, this guy is a good definition. I'm telling you, I know this dude. He's a buddy. Joel, you are living your best life.
Well, what's interesting, I thought I was living my best life at that time, but in actual fact, I was dealing with some level of acceptance of kind of like working within a company that I wasn't super happy with necessarily, climbing another person's tree. You guys know the Einstein quote that, if you try and teach a fish to climb a tree, he'll spend his whole life thinking he's stupid. Well, when you're working in a large group in a company that you're maybe not, although I was a 50-50 partner, my partner at that time was the CEO and I just kind of let him run it and he was doing a good job. And, but what that means is you kind of take a second place to what needs to go on. So in my mind, a lot of the things that I was excited about doing, we just weren't going to do.
And so on the outside, you looked killer.
Outside, I looked killer. March 12th, I'm coming back from the gym. My wife and I are looking at doing another trip down to outside Tampa. I'm finding these little Sherpa dog carriers because we got two shrimpy little dogs we're going to fly with. And I found one on Facebook Marketplace. I stopped the car with my wife and son. I go to pick up this carrier. And as I'm walking back to the carrier, this pain and pressure just erupts in my chest.
This is in Florida or BC?
This is BC. This is in Vancouver. So we're up in Vancouver, getting ready to fly down to Florida here. And this pain erupts, and I'm going to go on, WTF, what is this? What the fuck, I make it back to the car, and I collapse into the front seat. And I say to my wife, and my son, I said, listen, I don't want to get you guys freaked out, but something's not right here. I kind of stumbled across the road to get to the car.
And at this point, you had never had any previous symptoms or pains?
No history of heart disease or anything like that in my family.
Wow.
You're not taking anything. No doctors talk to you about anything. Nope. May I ask your age?
I'm 68 now. I was 67 at that time, I think.
But healthy in every regard that you would know.
Healthy in every regard.
Yeah. Doing physicals annually or?
Yeah, whenever I can get around to it. Doing the annual colonoscopy for all that kind of stuff that a guy my age would do.
Yeah.
So you stumble in the car.
Stumble in the car. I say, listen, I want to figure you guys out. My wife, who's trained at, in first aid and also a veterinarian as well, does a couple little checks on me and she calls the ambulance. Ambulance arrives. I hop into the ambulance, pop a baby aspirin orally. They hook up an IV and electrocardiogram. I puke 3 times on way to the hospital. And I get in the hospital. They pull some blood, blah, 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 and run an echocardiogram and so forth. And it looks like I've had a heart attack. I'm kind of in denial because probably about 8 years ago, I had some chest pains. I go to that same emergency ward and I walk out of there with a bottle of Pepto-Bismol, kind of ate too much Indian butter chicken and all that. Again, Vancouver is famous for Indian food. So I'm kind of in denial on this whole thing. I'm going, this can't be, this isn't me. I can't have a heart attack. And I'm kind of joking with the doctor, like, come on, doc, just send me out with a big bottle of Pepto-Bismol. Let's get on with this, right? He goes, no, you've had a heart attack. So next morning, I get wheeled into the cath lab, and they insert a femoral catheter, and they do a angiogram of my heart, which reveals that my left anterior descending artery, which is the big one, is an 80 to 90% blocked.
Wow.
And I'm joking with the surgeon. I didn't have any sedation, or maybe I did for that a little bit. I don't think I did. I think I just kind of went, nah, we're just going to do this. And I'm chatting with her, and she goes, yeah, we call that the Widowmaker.
Holy shit.
And I go, WTF, what the fuck? So they put next thing is they pop a stent in. I go back to the recovery ward. I got to lie there for 2 hours while the site heals. And I walk out of there, 8 hours, 12 hours later on 5 medications.
By the way, is there a way to test whether your arteries are getting clogged or at what percentage? Is there some kind of like checkup that one can do?
Joe, the only thing that I know is an angiogram where they're doing a dye study up your leg or up your arm. I chose the leg because there was some risk of having, some paralysis of the arm. So I didn't want to do that.
But those tests were done subsequent to the heart attack.
Subsequent to the heart attack, yeah.
But I guess you'd have to, like, if you check your blood pressure or something, you'd imagine there would be
to kind of monitor whether you're leading.
And by the way, this is not uncommon. I was watching a video with Dr. John Campbell and a guest that are talking about taking a certain type of amino acid to break down spike protein from COVID-19 infections or vaccines. And she quoted another medical person there that was 55 and a runner who had a heart attack.
Curious, were you vaccinated?
No, I was not.
With the COVID? Okay.
Yeah, I've always had a little bit of underlying inflammation. I want to impress upon everybody and the listeners that a heart attack is an inflammatory event. It is something that triggers the whole clotting reaction within your heart, and there's a clot that forms and blocks off the arterial supply to the muscle of the heart and so forth, thus the pain and all that, right? So it's an inflammatory event. So what we're seeing is that post-COVID-19, and I had COVID twice, and post that, and also, especially with the vaccination, is that this kind of spike protein is circulating around in there. I'm not an expert on this, but of the work that I've researched and done, that's what I'm now looking at as to why did I have an inflammatory event that triggered a heart attack.
And if any viewers, listeners, throw in the comments, if you have info on this, how do you, having a heart attack, what are you looking for aside from a chest pain or something going on? Like, what do you do?
I think we've got to look at the inflammatory conditions of the average North American that eats a certain type of diet and perhaps went through COVID and got vaccinated, and there's a higher level of inflammation in the body. That's what I'm looking at now. Anyways, to roll it back here a little bit, I got home and said, what does this mean? Does this mean that I'm going to now, at 68 years of age, 67, whatever it was, am I just going to coast to the finish? Is my life over? What do I do? And
really makes you reflect, doesn't it?
It's time to reflect. And I had a moment, kind of an epiphany. I had a kind of a light bulb moment that I need to turn this into something, what is the new WTF, what's truly fulfilling in my life. And I sat back and I thought, what do I really love doing? And I really love working with people. That I was still in my other company working with people, but not so much as I normally would. I'm kind of a hands-on guy, working with people. And so I ended up, leaving that other company, got my partner to buy me out, and starting just kind of a whole new chapter for my final symphonic movement, my final operatic act for the next 20 years. And that's what I'm passionate about now. And that's why there's a new website going up called My WTF Life that's going to celebrate, going from that WTF moment into the what's truly fulfilling moment, and helping people find out what really lights them up.
You are part of our group. It's this entrepreneurial group that's like, what change do you have to do in your life now to actually move into the higher gear of what's truly fulfilling? You said it perfectly. I mean,
and I'm a huge, proponent of learning through others' experiences. It doesn't necessarily have to happen to you, for you to wake up in life and say, all right, what do I find fulfilling? What
I know.
essentially is my purpose? It's unfortunate that there are certain events that need to occur for some, right? But that's the essence of this podcast, like learn through others' experiences. And there's a lesson with what you went through. There's a lesson that others, can obviously take on and start to think, I don't need to wait for something like that to trigger.
You don't need to wait. Like I said the TED Talk, I said, you don't need to wait for life to shake you awake. You can start now. You can start rejecting that certain level of mediocrity or comfortness of cruising along, maybe not doing exactly what you're meant to be doing. And you can make that decision to go and start doing what you're meant to be doing. And I think there's great spirit and revitalization of energy that you feel when you get to that moment.
Would you be doing this if that never happened to you?
That's a good question. I haven't been asked that before. Would I be doing it? That's a really good question. I might be cruising along still. And it took this to kind of say, okay, that routine that I'm in is not healthy. Working in a company that, is not really, it's a great company, but it's not really using, my skills to what they needed to be used. Let's put it that way.
Interesting.
So now you come to this realization, and you're self-determined that I'm going to embark on this new venture. From having that awareness to now execution, what happens?
What happened is I started to envision what the final product was, helping other people, and also starting a brand new consulting company on helping other people more online, more worldwide. All over the world now are, in my profession, young veterinarians that are graduating and they need help in starting practices. Asia is a huge market as China, for example, starts to develop more and more sophisticated medical systems for veterinarians. They've just started, thanks to my good friend Dr. Henry Yu, they've started a 4-year program versus a 2-year program.
Have you been to China and spoke?
Yes, I have. I've been to China twice with Dr. Yu, and that was extremely fascinating. I don't know, we all grew up with these ideas of China. We remember Tiananmen Square and the one guy with the tank and all that. And when I went there, what I saw was this population of really motivated entrepreneurs and out there making money and making things happen. So despite what we hear about communism, and you go into the restaurant, you see little stickers on the table that says, eat all your food, don't waste. And when you go up in the elevator, there's a little sticker that says, take care of your family. And it shows a little cartoon drawing of an old man and his wife. There's that kind of lovely socialism type stuff. But outside of that, entrepreneurism is alive and well in China.
That really expands your view. Like, there's worlds out there. It's not just
Totally.
America. And you can imagine exploding a business in China, like to help people in China.
The new online course that you've been privy of, that the website's going to show and all that stuff, the new online consulting course features my standing ovation practice, and that will all be converted into Chinese text and probably using AI into some sort of translation as well.
So how difficult was it to go from concept to execution?
I've always been a starter, Joe, and that's been kind of my forte, is to envision something. I've started 3 or 4 other companies and ideas. I've got more ideas than I've got time. So for me, it was a matter of saying, what do we need to do with this? And then I ran into Sabran, that's got a great marketing company, and I ran into David, who's a great videographer, and I thought, okay, this is where this all starts to tie together. One successful thing I've always found is work with younger guys than me. Work with younger people that know tech, because it's stuff that I don't know and I don't necessarily see what's going on out there. And it was through Sabran's and David's help that we're starting to put together a really super cool training concept for people. It's going to be a little bit of a hybrid. There'll be online courses, online modules people do, and then there'll be weekly coaching calls on Zoom.
A year ago, the event happens.
Yeah.
I mean, you've moved quite rapidly. I mean, so you left the corporate job.
No time to waste.
Started your own thing. I mean, talk about something that causes motion, right?
Yeah.
And you have already done a TED Talk on my WTF Life.
Yeah.
And it's really cool that you're announcing this right here on the podcast. Yeah. This is a new website. So what is your vision for this? What is this?
My vision is to run into people that have had similar incidents like mine. It doesn't even need to be cardiac, but some kind of life-moving thing that they can get stuck in. That's what I see, is that people get stuck in this incident and they drop down emotionally into fear and think they've just got to lie in a bed and walk slowly and, I don't know, eat 3 meals a day or whatever it is. They've got to be a good boy and girl, and they've got to, kind of pray and hope that they're going to live. And that's not living. Living is doing things, and living is following your basic purpose inside of you.
So have you jumped out of an airplane with a parachute yet? Have you gone bungee jumping?
No, I haven't, but I'm not driving any slower when I get behind the wheel of a car.
You have a Porsche Spider convertible.
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Everything's faster.
Everything's
faster, right? It's kind of like, this open road. Blah. Yeah, I'm just down south here in Bradenton yesterday, meeting up with another Porsche Spider owner, and took his out for a good rip in the Florida countryside. That was a lot of fun.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
If Florida can have a countryside, I guess we can call it the Everglades or something.
It kind of does. You got to get out in there, and even up around Tampa, there's a few curvy old wagon roads. I think they're old stagecoach roads, which were probably originally Native American trails. Right.
Yes.
And they've got a few curves in them. But short of that,
How was it doing your TED Talk?
The TED Talk was a really interesting experience. I got some extremely good coaching. It was just under 7 minutes long. You come up with a concept, you work with a speaking coach. And I used a kind of an online program where you speak into it, and with AI called Yodely, really cool little program. And it analyzes your talk and suggests talking points and, all this. That was cool. And then I had a coach, and then I flew down to St. George, Utah. Vegas first, drove up to St. George, Utah, and you do 2 takes on it.
Wow, deliberate.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So, and you talked about my WTF Life.
Yeah, I talked about my WTF Life and the incident, the WTF moment, turning that into what's truly fulfilling moment of reflection, and then embarking off on a new project to scratch that itch.
I mean, you've been around the business world for a long time. How different is the business environment today from, let's say, decades past? And is it easier? You obviously have extensive experience, but there are those that would like to take initiative and do their own thing. And sometimes the argument is much more difficult today than it was, but I would argue that it's much easier today.
I think it's easier today in so many ways because there's technology that's available. The one thing I do know with people starting off is the more trained you can get on just some business techniques that I studied on. It was about my third year into practice. I bought a private veterinary practice in 1986, 2 years out of vet school. And 3 years later, I had another WTF moment. I'm in the middle of a difficult surgery, and the bank manager's on the phone saying, hey, you got to put some money in the account. I'll hold your staff's paychecks for 48 hours. And I'm just a guy that's showing up, right? I just show up and people should come on the door. So I had another kind of one of those moments. I've had a couple of them through the years, but I had another one of those moments that something had to change. And that got me, starting on an executive MBA style program that I would fly down to a city and go and study in a course room on marketing and HR and finance and all that kind of stuff, and then fly back and implement my practice with a coach. And that boomed my business up to a 3.5 doctor practice. Had time to start the manufacturing company, also a mobile endoscopy company. That really set me as being an entrepreneur. And that's my advice to people starting off today, is that there's some skills that you need to get, and people are much smarter than they think they are. But it's a little bit like buying a plane. I always say, I could fly a plane, and my goddaughter laughs because she's a pilot and says, yeah, you probably could, but I don't think you could land it. I think she's probably right. And so I know enough to get into trouble. And I think so many people are like that with business. Enthusiasm goes a long way, but you need some skills on marketing and HR and organization, good quality control, and finance and all that kind of stuff. And that's the kind of stuff I'm teaching now in the Standing Ovation Practice program.
I love it.
I mean, look, you have Standing Ovation Practice, you have Parker Business Solutions,
yeah,
you have
my WTF Life.
WTF Life. All this stuff launched just a little shorter than a year ago after your WTF moment.
WTF moment.
I mean, you are cruising.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, but like that's fun. I like it. I like to have that kind of stuff going on. What's super cool now is seeing all this new technology come in, like AI. That at first I really poo-pooed it, but where I see it being super good now is that AI has the ability, for example, in a veterinary practice to listen in on phone calls and tell you whether it can do a sentiment analysis, which means it can figure out the mood of the client at the start of the phone call and the mood at the end of the phone call and see whether they're happy. That's astounding.
Does that in any way inhibit our social skills or development of them?
I think it should develop them, Joe, actually, because one of the things you'll find is that people will put the wrong person up front in any business and the wrong person in the back. Sometimes they'll put a really nerdy technical person on the phones who is just really matter of fact. And like, yeah, there's an appointment today at 10. You want to come in? Like, they're not friendly at all. Right? And they should be in the back doing the technical work. And sometimes you've got a technical person back there that's a chatterbox that wants to chat with everybody and everybody's going, we got to get work done. They need to go up front.
So it essentially helps you define what personality should be in what department.
Yeah, I want my
That's
super friendly, chatty Cathys, chatty Chris's, whatever you want to call them, on that front desk. And I want to use AI to handle the phone calls so they don't have to handle phone calls, so that when a client comes in, they can deliver, right, like we're doing right now, a one-on-one client experience without that phone ringing, without me having to say, hey, Sabran, you're my best client, but I have no ideas who's on that phone, but I need to pick it up. They're more important than you. I want to use AI. I want to use off-site phone rooms so that when people walk into a business in a veterinary practice, there's somebody there that's got time for them. And they walk out of there having that above and beyond expected experience. They give a standing ovation by giving a nice review and referring their friends and family in. That's what I want to use, new technology for.
So you're not replacing staff with AI, you're enhancing.
Enhancing it, good. We're not replacing. We want to keep the people on the front desk. We're just getting rid of those interruptive phone calls and all that irritating stuff.
It's all about, in my coaching, I'm finding you have to bring humanity back in. It's almost like we've had this sort of phase in the last several years of like, how can we replace people? No, it's about making your people so human and making the human interactions better, because you can get rid of some of these unnecessary almost distractions.
Well, and even just right on a real granular level, I go to the same guy that's cut my hair for 20 years. He's a barber. He's got that little swirly blue and white and red thing, He's a traditional barber. But I forgot the appointment the other day because nobody reminded me. And I would love to have online booking with Mike. Shout out to Mike. I'd like an online booking with Mike that I can go and book an appointment and it reminds me. And that stuff is done so well by automation. And so then I can go and have that 30-hour-long chat with Mike while he cuts my hair and all that kind of stuff.
30-hour-long chat? You mean
30 hour? Yeah, 30 minute. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that hour-long haircut. To get the so what happened on that one is I forgot the appointment, and that kind of irritates Mike. So all of a sudden I'm kind of like, I get a phone call, 50 minutes later, are you coming? I'm going, oh shit, I forgot about it.
I think we're all a little guilty of that.
We are, but we can remove all that kind of friction. Totally. I call it. We can remove that friction by using automation.
The unnecessary chaos.
Chaos.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And I love it when people remind me on stuff. It's great. Be my EA.
I just double booked a freaking trip just this morning. I wish I would have had my AI calendar. I need an AI calendar assistant to tell me, no, idiot, you have another workshop on the same day.
Well, that's available now. You can get that. Yeah, you absolutely can get that. That's out there. I don't have that. I use Calendar through either Calendly or Go High Level, but that one's pretty good because I'm juggling multiple time zones and multiple projects.
So, okay, question. You obviously had this very defining moment recently, right? As a business owner, one who is just starting their own business or considering starting their own business, are there certain things to look for to sort of help you determine, hey, I'm a little bit too comfortable, or maybe the stats of my business, are sort of heading in the downward trend? Like, what sort of things should one be looking for that sort of determine and define my business is going to do this or my business is going to do that. Because sometimes it just kind of hits you smack in the face. And I've experienced like hearing those that are relatively new in business, hey, just like out of nowhere, all of a sudden I collapsed or I boomed and I didn't expect it. There's got to be some sort of indicators.
With tracking numbers, key performance indices, and graphing them out to where you can get a line graph you can follow, you can begin to get some prediction. And what you want to get in a business is understand that you want to form a relationship to what your promotional actions are, to what happens when people come in the door, and then what you charge them and what your gross income is. Most people just follow the gross income. So for example, if your gross income is going up, you're obviously doing something right. Is it going up because your fees are going up, or is it going up because you're seeing more people? Graph it out. And if you're seeing more people, why is that? If you got somebody that's on the phone calling all the time, well, what happens if they get sick and quit? Right? And if you're not really tracking the number of phone calls going out and seeing the connection with the number of people coming in and all that, you can miss that relationship and the prediction that when your gross income falls, like, why did it fall? Was that a problem with charging? Was it a problem with the numbers coming in? Why did the numbers fall? Oh, Nancy's not here anymore. Nancy went off to have a baby. That's awesome, but she used to do all the calls, or she used to manage all the outflow of the business. You want to get to a point in a business where you can understand the cause and effect. What do you cause that creates an effect of people coming in the door? What do you charge them? What do you deliver? And start to understand those relationships.
So, but who's wearing that hat? Because if you're the creative genius behind the business, and there's a lot of business owners, right, that just their innate ability is to create. They're not necessarily the guys that can monitor the stats or determine, what's making the business viable. So who in business is wearing that hat?
It's a good question. Remember Batman and Robin? Robin did that shit.
Yeah.
Robin did all the invoicing to Commissioner Gordon and all that stuff, right? Yeah. So Batman could just go and do his thing. And always reminds me of the Rolling Stones. We see Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, Ronnie Wood, all those guys on there, but they have a staff of 450 people and they have a manager. And that's the role, Joel, of the manager right there. And especially the manager that's kind of over the organization, division, department of the business. The one that's organizing the training, the hiring, the tracking of the numbers. How often should you sample your business? Well, most people oftentimes don't look at it for once a year. That's what I was doing to start. I'd look at the profit loss statement once a year. I'm a smart guy. I look at the bottom. If it had a little brackets or parentheses around it, I knew I'd lost money. And then color printers came out. If it turned red, I'd go, oh, shit. But, if all you're doing is looking at your numbers by the end of the year, you're way too late to change anything. Sure. So there is a game of business that's a year long. There's 12 seasons. There's 12 games. That's the 12 months. And there are 4 quarters in each game. That's your weeks. So start tracking your KPIs, number of brand new people, number of transactions, what the average client transaction was, and your gross income. That's your kind of basic quad. Start tracking those.
I would venture to guess, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we most of us have heard the statistics are pretty staggering, right? With small business failing after several years. If I had to guess, I would say that individual that you're talking about in that business is probably missing. How many small businesses actually has an individual that is monitoring monthly
and weekly? So
and weekly.
I know.
Managing the business while you create the product.
Totally.
Most businesses are run by entrepreneurs. Myself was like that too. I had other people, Joe, that did that stuff for me. Hired them. Yeah, so listen, I need the graphs up on the wall every week at the end of the week for the staff meeting. In fact, we'll have an executive meeting for 30 minutes before the staff meeting. But somebody else would post all that stuff. I know how to do it, but that job is for somebody else.
But the point is that individual is so critical to the viability of the business. And that's probably a missing ingredient more than any of us can imagine.
And really, if you look at the average business there, they just show up every day. That's what I was doing. I think it was Woody Allen that said that 80% of success was showing up. That was me. I'd show up. And if nobody was coming in the door, I'd call the guy down the street. And that stuff goes on all too often. And it's completely useless to call the guy down the street. He doesn't know anything more than you know. And so what you want to be doing is understand, again, the relationship between your cause points, how you outflow with promotional actions, your website, your Google ads, whatever that is, and what happens with the phone. If you do a Google ad program and the phone starts to ring or your online booking fills up, then write that down. That's a successful action. You want to repeat that. I was going to say, and if you spend a whole bunch of money on postcards that doesn't do anything, don't do that again. Right? There's this kind of moving ahead, kind of like the ebb and flow of the tide, hopefully forward more than backward, where you're investigating what makes your business run, what lights it up.
I know this sounds so simple, but how many people are actually repeating these successful actions and then eliminating the unsuccessful actions, right?
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
Or monitoring statistics. I mean, I know I have clients that, sort of know that they're supposed to be looking at some statistics and tracking how they're doing, and they don't do it. They're too busy.
Well, in technical fields, it's really interesting because very few of us in my field of veterinary medicine got into that to make a ton of money. Now, guys do make a ton of money on it, especially with multiple doctor practices and corporate sales, and high multiples. But most of us got in just for kind of the love of it. So we're kind of like, the joke used to be that if a veterinarian won the lottery, they'd practice till the money ran out, because we do it whether we got paid or not. And that's a very beautiful, pure thing. But so we don't want to lose that. What we need around that is a structure of organization and support staff that make sure that the lights are kept on, that people are charging for what they're doing, that they're hiring people, that they're tracking the stats, the graphs, and all that kind of stuff.
I love this conversation, right? Because I think the essential point is it's not just applicable to one industry over another. This is business. The crux of this conversation is business. It's
business.
applicable to any business.
It is. In fact, Sobrano and I have talked about this. We're launching the standing ovation practice, but I think right behind that could be the standing ovation business. And
other industry. It could help anybody.
It can help anybody. Yeah, this first one's very vertical within the veterinary market, but it doesn't have to be.
A few questions before we wrap up, because I don't know if you can give it to us, but if I was to ask you wisdom at 68 for a younger person who wants to be an entrepreneur, wants to be a business owner, what's a piece of wisdom you could share with that guy?
I'd say you're smart, and you're smart enough to figure it out. If you've got a vision, then don't wait for life to wake you up. Just go for it and make some moves, and you will find that your moves and your positivity will open up all kinds of doors. There was a famous quote, and I forget who said it, but it went something like that, something that when you really commit yourself, all kinds of acts of God, the providence kicks in and opens up all kinds of opportunity. To a younger me, a younger doctor, and I had an opportunity that showed up in front of me. What did I know about running a business? And I took it. The smartest thing I did was then I realized when it wasn't going well was to figure it out.
Repeatedly, when we've had people on the show, the commit yourself, like commit for real.
Yeah.
Don't commit sort of and have a fallback that you, in the back of your mind, is there.
I was going to write a book called No Plan B. That's what got me into vet school. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was going to go to vet school, come hell or high water. It didn't get in the first application. There was like 200 applications. I got in the second go. I got in the fallback group, and then some guy decided not to go, and I got in. With no plan B comes no fallback, just like, I'm going to make this happen. And what an interesting phenomena is in veterinary medicine are the Caribbean schools, the vet schools that are down there, like St. George and Ross and all that kind of stuff. And these graduates there, they've got that no plan B because they couldn't get into a Canadian or American school. So they went down to the Caribbean, paid extra money to do it. And my experience is that they're great entrepreneurs. You know what? They're not fearful. They're not fearful about going into debt. Now, there's going into debt that, if you want to buy, $150,000 Harley Davidson chopper, right? And you're going to drive across America. Like, I get it. That might be nice. But if you're afraid to spend, alternatively, to spend $500,000 on a loan to start in a good location with some coaching and all that kind of stuff, a brand new veterinary practice, that's a smart thing to do.
See, we've talked about that. We've had episodes. It's such a misunderstood concept
Of debt. Yeah.
Like when you define the word debt, to most, it's all encompassing, meaning it's bad.
Yeah.
But I am in total agreement with what you're saying. I like to define it as like constructive and destructive debt. And what you're defining, what you're talking about is constructive debt. Having the ability to determine, all right, is this going to be destructive debt or is it going to be constructive debt? And if you can't decipher, then that's when you get harmed.
That's when you'd harm too, you know. And sometimes what I'll find is that brand new practice owners, and I was probably like that too, looking back, again, what would I say to myself now? I'd probably say, buy a practice, get some really good quality used equipment for not very much money, pay it off. Once the practice is, you know, out of that, once you got some lift, it's like an airplane taking off and you've got some profit, then you can buy better equipment. But sometimes they'll go and they'll buy the best equipment and nobody's coming in the door.
Oh gosh, that reminds me, there was a dentist that I was consulting from a marketing side. Him and his wife decided to buy all the best brand new equipment.
Yep.
And they went into, such massive debt setting up the perfect practice. And like, why?
You know, they want to have all that stuff and it's nice. They want that pride of that nice equipment. And, you know, I eventually had really nice equipment, but nowadays, you know, like I'm consulting a veterinarian on getting into endoscopy because I did so much of it. And I'm saying, go find nice used equipment. You don't have to buy new. Hospitals have got beautiful, nice, you know, used high quality, high definition endoscopes in the basement of their building because they get all the new stuff.
And you can upgrade, of course, but get out of that initial debt.
And don't take on too much debt. Otherwise it becomes destructive. So minimize your debt.
Strategic.
Awesome. Any good book you're reading right now that we should share with everybody?
What I'm reading, believe it or not, I'm reading "Crushing It" by Gary Vanderspeak.
Gary V.
Gary V. Yeah, and I'm enjoying that.
Yeah.
Right. I'm also reading another one on the history of the Comanches in southern Texas back around the 1800s.
Interesting.
It's been great having you on the show today. Thanks for sharing and your announcement of my WTF Life. I'm sure we'll hear more about it. People like changing their lives at the moment.
Yeah. And hop on and talk to some other people on that website, listen to the stories, and have that moment before life wakes you up. Do it now.
Do it now.
There's no age that determines when you can kick it into eighth gear.
Do it now. That's the message.
Gear.
Love it.
Thanks.
I'll do it.
What do we say?
Hey, thanks for watching. If you like the episode, make sure you hit the subscribe button and that notification. Tell your friends. We'll see you next time.